I always believed we had a strong marriage. We weren't perfect, but we had built a life together. One that felt stable, unbreakable. My wife and I had been married for 15 years. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we always found our way back to each other. At least, that's what I thought. Our son, Daniel, was 12. He looked up to me in a way that made me proud but also terrified. He saw me as someone who could do no wrong, a man who had it all together. I tried to be that man for him. I coached his soccer games, helped with homework, and made sure to be present in his life. He trusted me completely. Dinners were always the same: laughter, small talk, the occasional inside joke between my wife and me. But lately, something had changed. My wife had been distant. I told myself it was work stress, exhaustion, or just one of those phases couples go through. I didn't press her. Maybe I should have. The distance was subtle at first. She'd sit on the couch scrolling through her phone instead of watching TV with me. She'd go to bed early, claiming she was tired. Conversations became surface level, lacking warmth. I told myself I was overthinking it. We were fine. Then I met her. It started innocently. A woman at work, someone I barely noticed before. She laughed at my jokes, asked about my day, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts. It felt good. I wasn't looking for anything, but suddenly, I found myself drawn to her. She noticed things about me that my wife no longer did. One evening, after a long meeting, she mentioned grabbing coffee. I hesitated but agreed. We sat in a quiet cafe, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't flirting. At least, not yet. But there was something there, a connection I hadn't felt in a long time. I convinced myself it was harmless. I was a married man, a father. I wasn't crossing any lines. But as days passed, I found myself looking forward to our conversations. A text here, a lingering glance there. I knew it was dangerous, but I didn't stop. Daniel started noticing my absence, even if I hadn't gone anywhere. "Dad, you okay?" he asked one night while we were watching a game. "You've been acting weird." I laughed it off. "Just work stuff, bud." But he kept watching me, studying my face like he knew something was off. I wasn't a fool. I knew where this road led. Affairs didn't happen in a single moment. They were built on small choices, tiny betrayals that added up. I told myself I would stop before it went too far. But the truth was, I had already started falling. It didn't take long before coffee breaks turned into longer conversations, stolen moments in empty hallways, and texts that lingered long after they should have ended. I told myself it was still nothing, just a friendship, but I knew better. The way she looked at me, the way I responded, it was dangerous, and I wasn't walking away. The first time I lied about where I was, it wasn't even necessary. My wife hadn't asked. She assumed I was working late, and I let her. I sat across from this woman, listening to her talk, watching the way she leaned in when I spoke. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt alive. The first touch was small, a brush of her fingers against mine as I handed her a cup of coffee. It sent a shock through me. I could have pulled away, should have, but I didn't. That was the moment I knew I was in trouble. I started finding reasons to see her. A quick meeting, a casual lunch, even a simple text exchange late at night. It was never just about the words. It was the anticipation, the way my heart raced when I saw her name light up my phone. I wasn't the kind of man who did this. I had told myself that 100 times. And yet, here I was. The night it happened, I didn't plan it. We were working late, the office nearly empty. A joke turned into a lingering glance, a glance into a moment of silence that spoke louder than words. When she kissed me, I didn't stop her. Everything after that was a blur. The guilt didn't hit immediately. For a few hours, I felt nothing but the rush, the escape from the life I had built. It was only when I got home, when I saw Daniel asleep on the couch waiting for me, that the weight of what I had done hit me like a punch to the gut. I told myself it was a mistake, that I would end it. But the next day, I found myself texting her. A simple good morning. She responded immediately, and just like that, I was pulled back in. I became an expert at deception. Leaving earlier, coming home later, offering just enough affection to keep my wife from questioning. But Daniel noticed. Kids see things we don't think they will. "Why do you always have your phone with you?" he asked one evening, eyes sharp, searching for answers I wasn't ready to give. "It's just work," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about." He nodded, but his expression told me he didn't believe me. And for the first time, fear crept in. Not just of getting caught, but of something worse. Losing the one thing I had always taken for granted. My son's trust. The first real crack appeared when Daniel started watching me differently. Not the way a son looks at his father, but the way someone studies a puzzle, trying to fit the pieces together. I could feel his eyes on me when I glanced at my phone, when I left the room to take a call, when I came home later than usual. He wasn't asking questions outright, but he didn't have to. The doubt was already there. One evening, while my wife was in the shower, I caught him standing by the kitchen counter, staring at my phone. He didn't touch it, didn't even try to pick it up. He just looked at it, like he already knew whatever was inside would change things. "You're different," he said, voice careful, almost hesitant. "Not just busy. Different." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that nothing had changed. But I knew better. Lying to my wife was one thing. Lying to him felt worse. The next mistake was small but damning. I had gotten too comfortable. Too careless. I left my phone unlocked on the coffee table, a message from her still on the screen. It wasn't anything explicit, just a simple "last night was," before it trailed off. But it was enough. Daniel saw it. He didn't say anything right away. He looked at the screen, then at me. His face didn't show anger, just quiet disappointment, like he had figured out the answer to a question he never wanted to ask. I grabbed my phone too quickly, locking it before I met his eyes. "Who's that?" he finally asked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. There was no excuse that would sound right, no lie that wouldn't make things worse. "It's not what you think," I said, but even I didn't believe it. Daniel stared at me for a long time before shaking his head. "You should tell Mom." The words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't accusing me, wasn't even angry, just tired. Tired of pretending he didn't notice. Tired of waiting for me to do the right thing. I should have ended it right then. I should have come clean. But instead, I hesitated. I convinced myself I could fix this before it got worse, that I could bury the mistake before it destroyed everything. I didn't realize it was already too late. The moment of truth didn't come with a dramatic confrontation or a screaming match. It came in silence, in the weight of Daniel's stare across the dinner table, in the way my wife's smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. I knew he hadn't told her yet. Not because he was protecting me, but because he was waiting, giving me a chance to do it myself. But I didn't. I kept lying by omission, pretending things were normal when they weren't. And then, just when I started to believe I still had time, everything fell apart. It was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. My wife was in the backyard, Daniel was upstairs, and I was in the kitchen, my phone buzzing with a message I shouldn't have answered. But I did. And I didn't hear him come down the stairs. "Are you still lying?" His voice made me freeze. I turned slowly, phone still in my hand. He was standing there, arms crossed, eyes full of something I hadn't seen before. Disgust. He didn't wait for me to answer. He didn't need to. He just shook his head, like he had given up on me entirely, then turned and walked outside. Straight to my wife. I followed too late. By the time I stepped onto the patio, she was already looking at him, confusion turning to something sharper as she processed his words. "Ask him," Daniel said, voice steady but cold. "Ask him who he's been texting." My wife turned to me, searching my face for denial, for reassurance. I opened my mouth, but the truth was already there, hanging in the air between us. She didn't need me to say it. She already knew. The days that followed were a blur. Anger. Silence. Doors closing harder than they needed to. Daniel refused to look at me, and when he finally did, it was worse than anything I had imagined. "You were my hero," he said. "I actually wanted to be like you." That was the moment I knew I had lost something I could never get back. My wife didn't scream or demand explanations. She just asked one question. Was she worth it? I didn't have an answer. Because no matter how I tried to justify it, no matter what I told myself in the beginning, nothing was worth this. Maybe time would dull the pain. Maybe forgiveness would come eventually. But I knew one thing for certain. Some mistakes don't just cost you a marriage. They cost you the people who once believed in you the most.